Hello, I'm Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And there are two popular guns for Smith and Wesson today, and one is the 32 UC, and the other one is probably the 7-shot power port. And the 32 UC, she has a wonderful set of sights. People notice that right off the bat. It's hammerless, which copies a Centennial from the early 50s. It's 6-shot, 32 revolver, but it has a couple of issues. I think some of them come pre-adjusted, and what they do is, and I see a lot of this, they put in the spring kits, or they come with them, and these normally have a coil spring. They have a coil spring just like this. This is a 32 also from the 60s. It had the same action, but it wasn't available in hammerless, and it wasn't available in a lightweight, and it wasn't available with neat sights. It's called the Malt 30. But the original springs, the hammer spring and the trigger return spring, sitting in the rebound slide assembly, the coil diameter, the diameter of the spring wire was, the gauge was 0.035. And to achieve a better trigger pull on these, the first thing they did is they dropped them down to 0.032, both on the hammer spring and on the trigger return spring. Things are happening that aren't always good, and a lot of them, when they're delivered, you pull the trigger to the rear to fire it, and it stays to the rear. It has to be pushed forward with your thumbnail. And I'm not sure the 035 will correct that. And when I do them, I always make sure the hand is fit. And I can't talk about Smith and Wesson, because Smith and Wesson isn't like a big muscle you can go pinch. It's the sum of all, the collective sum of all the people that work there. And they may have more of a turnover rate today than they used to. And I'm not sure the dedication is the same. I don't want to speak for their employees. They probably have stellar employees. But the guns are going out with the hands too thick to operate the cylinder. Or they operate it, but they stick to the rear because the thickness of the hand determines the lockup, and it needs to be tailored for each individual cylinder as you fit the hands. And with the 032, it doesn't have all that power to return it. And so the 035 can help, and maybe a little gun slick on the lugs, but the best thing to do is to have your hand professionally fit. Now, when I go to the 035, I leave 2.5 coils out of the box, and I gloss the box. I take it to a soft wheel, especially that cam that returns the hammer. You know, that cam that comes forward on top of the rebound assembly slide. I always make sure it's glossed. I'm going to see if my son can enclose a picture. I got actually I did 2 of these today and 2 of these yesterday. One guy brought in a bunch of them. And the strut coming off the hammer, the guide for the hammer spring is, I believe, is some kind of a stamping. And this one was just left like a saw blade. I can't believe that the person assembling the gun couldn't say, well, that one's not good. Let's see if there's a better one. And that's one of the dedication problems I see. By the way, I should mention it now. Many of you that know Matt Olivier at M&H Classics, firearms sales, know that he's a gun sight junkie. And so I don't know if this is a gun sight edition or he had that put on there. But anyway, this is his gun. And I clean up the struts on every one. I put the trigger and the strut in my pockets at work, my front pants pockets. And then I do other parts on the gun. And then I walk over to a 400 grit wheel. And that's where, I first hit the trigger with a grinder so I get a nice radius. And then I go to the 400 wheel, then I go to a soft gloss wheel. And then on the strut, the one I was talking about the other day of the strut, it just looked like a saw blade. And I cleaned it up I stuck it between two pre-1981 pennies, the round dish of it, and in the vise. And then I took an 8-inch mill bastard and I cleaned it up. Then I took it over to the 400 wheel and polished it up, and then I put it back in the gun with a little gun slick on it, and the spring and the keeper. So I've been trying to use the original 032 spring on the hammer with a Bill Lowridge cylinder and slide long firing pin. That takes the firing pins from like 495 or 492 up to 508, I think, over ½ inch. And that's one thing that aids. And so I do my tricks to the trigger return to make them right. And then I rework the spring system on the hammer, and then I change the firing pin as well. But this is really wonderful. I've always liked the 32 because it's got less recoil. And of course, you can run magnums in them. What do they call them? I don't know whether this is the H&R Magnum or the Federal. They did make a Federal Magnum. And a guy had one in my store today. And it was from like 93 or 94. He drove in from Yuma. And he picked up a couple and dropped off a couple. And he had one of these things in a Pro Series, stainless, like a 640, looked like a 640 in 32 Federal, which I thought was pretty cool. I told him I would use it for the display tonight, and then I thought I had too many guns already. But I thought I would start with the UC because they sell a lot of these, and they're real popular. And you know, the sights, the lightweight, the enclosed hammer, you can't go wrong. 6 shots, it's just a dream. And so I thought we would go from the modern gun back. And so if we go to, I have the grips off so we can see the exotic spring systems that change in the spring systems. But the 30 has basically the same action with the big cylinder and the coil spring behind the hammer, the post-war action. And then this is a really cool one. This is the last of the little guns. You know, these are all the little guns. They have the little cylinders, the little trigger guards. This is pre-war stuff. And I was talking to a buddy of mine today, Gary. He loaned me that gun, a 4-inch 1916 32 Smith. And we were talking about, they must have been using up parts because the only I-frame they ran after the war, and this is it, the Terrier, they ran to about a 1960 or 61. And it has that tiny cylinder and that little tiny trigger guard. You know, and if you just look at the new J-frame, it has a much bigger trigger guard. So we're going to go pre-war on you now and show you that before the war they had a leaf spring in the I-frame, which is the little J, little guard, little cylinder. They had a leaf spring in it. And this is pretty cool stuff. But we've got an example here today. And again, it's another gun I got from M&H Classics. Matt, he knows my weaknesses. He bought it and he brought it right out to me. I meet him shooting occasionally, and it's got 2 leaf springs in it. And we'll get a close-up of this for you. And it's not exactly like the original I-frame. The leaf springs on the original I-frame, they were both hooked into the front strap. This one has the springs separated in the strain screw going through, holding one spring and then putting tension on the second. This is so rare, they only did it between 1904 and 1906. So I had to pay up for this one. Not much, but a lot for a blue-collar worker. But this is a great, we'll get you a close-up because this is something I never saw before until Monday. And I've been collecting these things all my life. So this is a great one, 1904 to 1906, separated springs. So these 2 guys down here, these guys started it all. This is the first swing out cylinder. Everything was top break or tip up or whatever. This is the first swing out cylinder Smith I-frame, which is pre-J frame. And you pulled forward on this rod to open the cylinder. And it doesn't have a cylinder release latch. And I've shown you this gun before. And the reason I wanted to have him here because it's just too cool that people talk. And Colt, they were the first with the swing out cylinder and the switch on the back. And they had a larger frame called the Navy, I think. It was a double action, 38 long, and it proved not to be strong enough for war, like the Moro Wars, and they just didn't drop people like they should. But this was made for stateside, and Sam Colt learned that people like the little guns. You know, he had the what do you call it? The Walker. It's like a 3 or 4 pound gun. But until he came out with the little pocket 1849, it was the first little pocket gun for civilian he brought out. He sold 330,000 of those. And so they had the medium frame. I don't have one here, like a K frame, only a Colt. It became the officer's model frame. They had those in 38 long. And so they had the design there. That was 1892. And in 1896, they were going to come out with this little 32. And it has the V spring in it, which, you know, you saw on the Python and lots of other guns. New Service, Police Positive, Shooting Master. They had this V spring in it. And I just did a video on this with the little leaf springs working the double action fly and the cylinder stop. But these came out in 96. 1896, they decided to come out with a pocket gun in 32, 6-shot. These guys could be brothers and sisters, but they're Smiths and Colts. These both came out in 1896, 32 6-shots. That's not a coincidence. Somebody at Colt talked to somebody at Smith and said, hey, we're coming out with this, you better come out with something. Or somebody at Smith said, hey, Smith's coming out with a 6-shot 32, you better do that over at Colt. And it ended up that these were approved by the police commissioner of New York City, Tom Selleck, Teddy Roosevelt. Anyway, these are the 96s, and this is where it all started. And we went from this with the cylinder stop on top. The hammer works it, and it locks the cylinder in place, but it's on top, not bottom. They went to the bottom shortly thereafter. We went from this gun to this gun in 100 years, but they're almost the same, and they can shoot the same cartridge, the 32 S&W long. Anyway, they're a kick. Smith cylinders are worth collecting. They're worth everything. We have some great ammunition here. Some of these 2-piece boxes, the old Winchesters. Some of the boxes are not in that great a shape. Here's some nice Western, Winchester Western. My dad had a lot of this, barely post-war. And then what I can get today, unfortunately, if I'm buying a half case or a case at a time, all I can really find that's reasonable is this Cellar and Bellet down at True Shot in Tempe. And it's got hard primers, which is good because I want these guns to work when I set them up with whatever you have. And so when I set these up, I'll try it first with the long firing pin and leaving the hammer spring at the 32 thousandths diameter coil. But I do keep springs in stock, the Smith and Wesson 035 coil diameter springs in stock. Sometimes you got to bump them up a little bit to keep them running. But you always have to go to the 035 in here, and people tell me all the time, I just drop the spring kit in my gun, and I tell them, before you drive over, get your old springs, put them in your pocket, and bring them with you because I need them, or I'm going to charge you for new springs. There's a lot of great stuff. I've always liked miniature stuff. You know, I got the little miniature. This isn't totally miniature; it's a Magnum, but I like the miniature stuff, and these I-frames are just so cool because they're little. And then there's this crazy different permutations that are going to be enjoyable for you to see in close-ups, the spring arrangements. So thanks for watching, and send your comments and questions, and I'll handle them as best I can. Thanks.